and drink my blood. And they all departed from him. And he turns to the 12. He says, will you leave also? Haven't I chosen you, and one of you is a devil? And Peter says, where were we going to go? You alone has the words of life. He comes to the table. He gives them bread and he gives them wine. And as soon as they get up, they go to pray. And the three that he was the closest to, the soldiers come. Peter tries to defend him and runs off. Now Jesus is alone. You're going to be alone. Sooner or later, one day, your sonship, the hour of your visitation of sonship is going to show up. And you won't be able to call Pastor so-and-so, evangelist so-and-so, your husband or your wife, or call your children for prayer. You're just going to have to be you and Jesus. Just you and Jesus. And you'll never be the same again. A transformation will take place inside you. And you will be changed on the inside forever. Forever. You'll never be able to go back. You will be sealed with the Holy Ghost. Sealed with the spirit of promise. Never to go back into the wilderness. Never even contemplating going back to Egypt. So when he came, he spoke in parables, in dark sayings. Now, blue represents heaven. The badger skin is the seal skin that goes down deep into water. So the heavens for height and the sea for depths. So Jesus spoke in parables, and in hearing they could not hear, and in seeing they could not see. So he told the disciples, are you also without understanding? Let me explain the parable. And so, Brother Vic, come and help me get the hidden mysteries off. Let me get this out of your way, buddy. And so, once he began to explain the parables, then he uncovered himself. And he showed himself for who he was. Now, in essence, what comes over this is the veil. So you have the veil, you have the badger skin, and then you have the blue curtain that goes over that. So now Jesus begins to explain the parables. But on the day he got sacrificed, he rent the veil so he could be seen in the glory that he had with the Father in the beginning. Because when he's leaving the Passover feast, he begins to pray, John 17, Father, give me the glory that I had with thee in the beginning, before the world was. Now, there's a doctrine called the doctrine of kenosis. And that doctrine comes from Philippians chapter 2, verse 7, where it says, and he made himself of no reputation, but became as a man, and then a servant, and died the death of a criminal on a cross. King James, because of the Old English language, uses the word reputation. And the Council of Nicaea, going all the way back to the Council of Nicaea back in 325, one of the things that was dividing the empire that Constantine inherited was the doctrine that said that Jesus was not the Son of God. He couldn't be the Son of God because God cannot be tempted, using James chapter 1. So he had to be a prophet or a holy man, but he could not be the Son of God because God cannot be tempted, nor does he tempt any man. So the other side said he was the Son of God and Son of Man. But they said, well, how can he be tempted? You see, the Son of God cannot be tempted is very, very true. When Jesus came into the world, he did not come as an immortal. He came as a mortal so he could be tempted like his brethren in all things. So it was the Son of Man that was being tempted. When Jesus, as the Son of Man, got tempted, he yielded to his true identity as Son of God, and the devil fled, ran away, horrified, terrified. Are you come to destroy us before our time? You see, the demons knew that his spirit could destroy them, consume it. All he had to do was open his mouth. He cast some of them into pigs, remember? Jesus could have put them back in the pit. So you're going to go into the pit with the other 250 million demons, and you're not coming out. At the moment of his voice, of the sound of his voice, the demons would back away because they didn't want to be destroyed before their time. So they gone. So what they did to explain this was that Jesus, as Son of God, emptied himself, kenosis. They changed the word keno to kenosis, meaning empty himself. Every commentary, every known commentary uses the word kenosis. It's called the doctrine of the kenosis. God emptied himself and became a man. That is not true. He abased himself to become a man. God could never lose his divinity. Remember, he told Jacob, "O Jacob, thou worm, know this, I cannot change, I change not. I am who I am, and I cannot change." And so what God did, oh, what a beautiful formula. What God did is he took his Son and placed him in a body and called that body Jesus, the Son of Man. Jesus, the Son of God, did not have the name Jesus until he became mortal. And ye shall call him Jesus, for he shall save his people. It's predicated on something happy. When he's conceived, Mary gives him the name. By the way, every famous man in the Bible is named by the woman. Did you know that? All of the 12 sons on this breastplate is named by the women. Rachel and Leah, named all of them. Even though Bilhah and Zilpah had some of them, it was Rachel and Leah that named them. Now, Rachel gives Benjamin his name Benoi, son of my sorrow. Now something happens. Jacob calls him son of my right hand. Let me give you the story and then we'll take a break. Joseph was the one that was favored. He came out with a coat of many colors. Now, what that signifies is that when the father gives one of the sons a coat of many colors, what he's saying is, this son is the priest. He singles him out as head of the family because in those days before the law, the head of the family was the priest. Remember, Job offered up sacrifices for his family and for his son. Peradventure, they may have forgotten to do something. So the priest was actually the father. So what Jacob is doing by placing this coat of many colors on Joseph, he's saying, this is going to be the priest of the family, and all of you are going to have to bow down to him. Well, you know what happens? They're so jealous of him, they're so envious of him, that they make plans to kill him. And of course, Reuben says, well, why should we kill him? Let's just throw him in a pit. So his blood is not on our hands. So what happens is Reuben is planning on coming back and trying to save him, but Judah sees a camel train going down to Egypt and says, hey, why should we kill him? Let's profit from this. Let's sell him. And so they take Joseph out and they sell him. You know the rest of the story. He goes down to Egypt. And so he goes into prison. You know how the story goes. He gets arrested. He's falsely accused of committing a lewd act with the priest's wife. And he gets accused for that, and he gets thrown in prison. And he's in prison. All the time he's in prison, he says to himself, I would not be here if it wasn't for my brothers doing this to me. I could be home with my daddy and my mama. I could be living a normal life. If it wasn't for them guys doing this to me, one day, just one day, if I ever get out of here. And he's sitting in prison. And they got two guys, a butler and a baker, a cupbearer and a baker. And they have a dream. And in the dream, the baker says, I had 3 baskets on my head full of bread, and a black bird came and ate and flew away and took the bread away. And the cupbearer says, I had a dream just like that. And I went to Pharaoh and I gave him the cup. And what could this mean? And Joseph comes on and says, I heard what you said. Tell me the dreams over again. And he tells him the dream, and he says, Baker, in 3 days, Pharaoh's going to lift your head. And in 3 days, the cupbearer, you're going to be restored. And so he says, when this comes to pass, you make sure Pharaoh knows that I gave you the interpretation of the dream. Well, what does that tell you? There was a conspiracy to kill Pharaoh, and Pharaoh didn't know who it was. He knew it had to be the baker or the cupbearer. So he threw both of them into prison until he could investigate and find out who was the one that was conspiring to kill him. And so Joseph tells him the interpretation of the dream, and it comes to pass, and the guy's all restored. He's at the table with Pharaoh, who's got all his princely clothes on, and he forgets Joseph. And Joseph's sitting there, what in the world's going on? I helped save one of these guys. All I asked him was to remember me when you get in front of Pharaoh. You know what happened? He had yet not forgiven his brothers. He did not realize yet that it wasn't his brothers that brought him down to Egypt. It was God that brought him down to Egypt. And so once he wakes up and says, my goodness, this is God that brought me here. Those visions that I had when I was a child, they're going to come to pass. And so Pharaoh has a dream, and 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. You know about that dream. And the cupbearer says, I know a man who the Spirit of God is in. He's in the prison. Go get this guy. So they wash Joseph up. He comes up and he gives the interpretation. He's very smart. He says, now, Joseph says to Pharaoh, you need to find a man full of wisdom to be able to handle all of this. Why should I look any further, Pharaoh says. He says, I have found a man in whom the Spirit of God and wisdom is in. And so Joseph now is restored. Now watch this. Everything that pertains to the ark and the priestly garments, everything belongs to Joseph. From the waving of the sheaf, and I'm going to go through that here shortly. The first time the word linen is used is when Joseph comes out of prison. Remember, if you want to know the end of the matter, go to the beginning. The first time linen is used is when Joseph gets through. The first time the word ring is used, it's the same. These rings here is when Joseph gets the ring. The first time the word crown is ever used is when Jacob prophesies on Joseph and says, the crown of blessing shall be upon thy head because thou wast separated from thy brethren. Every time you want to know something, you go to the first time it's mentioned and you will get the original meaning. Now, later on in the scriptures, it might expand, but you got to stick with the original meaning. Now, I remember to answer your question. The word sanctification, the first time it is ever mentioned in the Bible is when God rested because he sanctified the Sabbath, for he rested from all his works. The word sanctification, what it really implies is when you have rested from your works and ceased from your works and have entered into God's rest from his works. That's when you're sanctified. When you stop striving to become and rest in what God says who you are, you're immediately sanctified. Because sanctification is in the present perfect tense. It is never in a process verb. If it's in the verb tense, then it's you performing it. Aaron did not sanctify himself. Moses sanctified Aaron when he placed the blood on him, and when he washed his garments, and when he washed his body, and when he sprinkled the blood. Moses sanctified him. Jesus sanctified you. You can't sanctify yourself. The pattern is immutable. No one can sanctify themselves. They must be sanctified by someone else. That's why it says in Hebrew, he that sanctifieth and they that are sanctified are one. Father, I sanctify myself for their sake. You have been sanctified by one man, and his name is Jesus. And if you're trying to be sanctified, other than the sanctification that Jesus has already performed, remember, sanctification is a process where somebody was cleansed. The night when he has communion, what does he do? He gets up from the table and he puts on a towel and he washes their feet, and he gets up and says, now you are clean from the words that I have spoken. You're not going to get sanctified any other way other than the word that Jesus has spoken. Now you're clean. The just shall live by faith. Does that answer your question? Sanctification is not a process. It is a state of resting in what God has said. All right. You got to go back to the beginning of the word just. It's not a legal term like most people assume. What it means is to be just like. So when God said, let us make man in our image and our likeness, what was he saying? I'm going to make man just like what? Me. That's justification. Just like me. Here's the evidence of it. If I slap you in the face under the law, you are justified by slapping me back. You're just like me. If I poke my finger in your eye and you poke your finger back in my eye, you're just like me. You're just like me. That's the term justified. So when God says you are justified, what he's saying is you're just like me. Don't yell. You don't lose your voice. You are just like him. Don't think it robbery to be equal with God. You're born that way. If you're trying to become that, you're saying in your conscience, I don't feel that way. I don't act that way. I don't behave that way. And all of those reasons is because you don't accept it by faith. Herein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, for the just shall live by faith. It's all by faith. That's the only righteousness that God accepts. Remember, Jesus comes out of the water and he says, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the Pharisees and scribes, you will in no wise, look at the term, every term is very, very important. He says, in no wise enter in. It's different from seeing it. Entering in means you enter into it. Now, what is the righteousness of the Pharisees and scribes? The what? The law. So the law says if I poke you in the eye, you can. If I kill your brother, you can kill my brother if you run across my brother. But if he's in the city of refuge, you cannot touch him. The moment he leaves the city of refuge, you come across in the village and you see him, you have the right to kill him. Okay? Justified simply means you're justified by faith, meaning by faith you believe that God says you're a new creature. You're just like the word he's spoken. I am a new creature. The just shall live by faith. Okay? All right. I want to open this box in a few minutes, and then we'll go to lunch, and then we'll take the lid off so you can see inside of it. Let's get back to Joseph real quick. Joseph comes out and he marries the priest's daughter, one of the priest's daughter, and now he's part of the priestly family, right? His first son is Manasseh. What's Manasseh's name mean? Does anybody know? Manasseh, that's one of the stones on here, Manasseh. That's this stone right here. Ephraim is right next to him. Judah's here, Reuben's here, Simeon's here. Boy, when I get to that, Manasseh means God has caused me to forget my toil and the sorrow of my father's house. Two things, my toil and my father's house. Now, when Adam got kicked out of the garden, what did he have to do? He had to toil the soil. Now, when he says the sorrow that I have, the persecution that I have, and all the sorrow that I've gotten in my father's house. Now, what is that talking about? Is Jacob's house a house of evil? Is Jacob's house a house of wickedness? No, Jacob is the house of God, right? What is he saying? God has caused me to forget the sorrow all the persecution and sorrow that I got while I was at the church. There's no deeper wound than being wounded by a fellow Christian. Give me your hand. Where did you get these wounds? In the house of your friends. There's no deeper wound than being betrayed by a fellow Christian or being denied by a person who's been eaten at your table. And so Jesus had to experience those wounds. Do you know what the purpose of a wound is? It's so the blood can come out. So your life can flow to the person that has wounded you. And until Joseph had the mercy to forgive his brothers, he stayed in the prison until he woke up. God placed me here to save my family. And so when they came and they said, oh my goodness, Jacob is dead, our father's dead, now he's going to avenge us. And he says, did you know that it was God that sent me here? What you did was evil, but it was God that ordained that I be here, that I may preserve your life and your children. There's a reason why you have been afflicted. There's a reason why you have been wounded. There's something in the future that requires that you get this wound. Don't despise it. Don't despise the chastening of the Lord. You have some? Can you drink this cup? God will never despise a broken heart and a contrite spirit. Heaven is my throne, and earth is my footstool. I am the high and lofty one, yet will I dwell with a contrite heart, a broken heart, and a contrite spirit. You can't ask for a better gift than say, Lord, give me your broken heart. Let me drink the cup with you. Many want the glory of God, but do not want to be partakers of his suffering. Why do you think in the gifts and the fruits of the Spirit, there's one fruit called long suffering? You know, some of you have been married and y'all been to hell and back, and you're still together. Your love for each other is pretty deep because you learn to suffer together. The soldiers that go to war, and they've been in battle, and their life hung on each other, and they make it home. You can never break that bond because they were in a life struggle together. That's what Jesus wants to take you through, your life struggle. And you can know, I am here for you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. This day, you will be with me in paradise. So you know the story about Joseph. And once he was able to forget and forgive, and forget that he the Adamic nature and forget the suffering he had in his father's house, then the second son comes, Ephraim, doubly fruitful. Where do you think Elijah comes up with to Elijah, and Elijah says to him, when he followed him, he says, "What do you want, Elijah?" He says, "I want a double portion. I want Ephraim." Whatever happened to you, however you got whatever you have, I want a double portion of that. And he says, if you see me when I'm taken from you, then you shall have it. But if you don't see me when I'm taken from you, then it will not come to pass. So what did he do? What was the requirement? Why? Because he wanted Elijah never to take his eyes off of him. Oh, there's a twig here. Where'd he go? Oh, I got to go there. Where'd he go? No. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Do not take your eyes off of Jesus, because there's a blessing. A greater work shall you do. A double blessing is going to happen to you. Greater works are you going to do. Okay? Let's break. It's 11:30. And then we're going to go through the atonement. We're going to take these pieces off, and we're going to expose some of the rest of the Ark of the Covenant. And I want each of you to come and look inside the Ark of the Covenant. And as a prelude, I'm telling you, the inside is bigger than the outside. And when you see it, it'll be pretty amazing. Now, I'm going to get the rest of the stuff that goes out here. So when we come back, are y'all ready to have lunch and so forth? Come on up here. Find that in Ecclesiastes. It says when everything is dried up and the wind is blowing and the storm clouds come, then shall the almond tree flourish. Because when Jesus was going through his winter tribulation, he flourished. He said, now, if they do this to a green tree, what do you think they're going to do to a plant? They were saying, a green tree.
It's just about impossible to get. Like,
yeah, you want to go through and see it, everything.
You want to be able to see, like,
way into it.
there's
Yeah.
like 5 million of them, then all you start seeing is your hand.
Yeah, which is funny because you see yourself.
Yes.
See if I can load this in. I don't know what's capturing. I can't see it. I can't.
Whatever it is, gotta be good.
Church?
Yeah, you see yourself.
I get excited and I blow the circuits on stuff. Thanks for being part of the second part of this. As you can see, there's about 20, 22 messages that I'm kind of condensing down into little capsules. The breastplate, there's 12 messages on here. Now, some of you can see this. This goes on the shoulders, and this attached on the front of this, and I'm going to go ahead and attach it so I don't have to hold it. Now, I want you to picture this.